Hello people, welcome back to the channel, and today I'm doing a tier list because I'm uncreative, uninventive and just a bit of a bland YouTuber. Anyway, it's a UFC Rematch tier list, which I don't think I've seen before, so I thought I'd do it. And the tiers are, I've got different gravy, and that's only for the best fights on this list, alright? And then below that it's mustard. You know, the fights are alright, they're good fights, but the gravy is not quite different. Beneath that we got, it's a bit iffy, it was a decent fight, but nothing too special. And then at the bottom, don't even want to say it, it's Rose against Carla 2, and that is actually where I'm going to start. If I tell you that I would rather watch Bilal Muhammad against Wonderboy Tom, actually screw that. I'd rather watch Ngannou versus Derek Lewis than ever have to watch anything of the level of crapness of that. It was just, the worst part about it, right, was when old Pat Barry went on at the MMA hour, he was like, yeah, follow the game plan. Shut up, you fucking... Well, actually, I'm not going to say anything about Pat Barry. I don't want to get demonetised. I mean, I'm not even monetised anyway at the moment. However, if I say that, I definitely ain't getting no cash out of this channel. So, all I'm going to say is, it was toilet. Don't want to talk about it no more. Let's move on. Right, next up, I'm going to do Stipe DC2, and it's a mustard fight. It's definitely a mustard fight. I mean, the first fight was obviously crazy with DC getting the win, old Mr. Potato Head over there, and he was also doing well in the second fight. I think he set like a strikes record in the heavyweight division over 15 minutes. I mean, he's obese and he can do that. He was obviously going to gas out, and I think in Stipe's defence, he worked him out and he landed them body shots. So, yeah, it was a good fight. It was a mustard fight. It ain't going to stay at the top of mustard, but it's there for now. I enjoyed it. It was decent, but it was not quite different gravy. Next, I'm going to move on to the rematch of Adesanya versus AP this most recent April. Now, I'm going to put it at top of mustard. As much as I was upset with the result as an Alex fan and an Izzy, not an Izzy hater, but I think he's a massive wet wipe. So I was upset with the result, but I mean the knockout, the storyline, the importance of the fight and all that kind of stuff, it has to go in mustard. As much as I don't like Adesanya, it was a good moment. I said it in a video. I hate him. Well, again, hate's a strong word. I don't hate the geezer, but I wouldn't piss on him if he was on fire, let's just say that. But no, the moment, the knockout and the spectacle of it means it's got to be mustard. And I think it was a better moment overall than DC Stipe 2. So, that's why it's going above it in mustard. Our fourth rematch is UFC 232's main event of John Jones against Alexander Gustafsson. Now, I'm going to put it in bit iffy for a number of reasons. I mean, the whole thing was a bit iffy. I mean, Jones fails the drug test and they just move everything to a different bloody state. I mean, that's iffy in itself, right? But in terms of the spectacle itself and the fight itself, I suppose the finish was good. That's something for Jones, but the fight itself just... I suppose naively we expected as fans that we get a similar fight to the first one, but it was like 5 years earlier and Gustafsson had lost in between, so it's not too surprising in hindsight, but I think the hype around it after their first fight made the rematch almost impossible to live up to it, and it definitely didn't. So that's why I'm going to put it in bit iffy, but it's nowhere near as bad as Rose and Carla. Here we go then, beautiful people. The first entry in different gravy is the rematch of Robbie Lawler and Rory McDonald. There's no other place this fight can go. It's a Hall of Fame fight. There's no way it's not going to be different gravy. And let me tell you, right, it was definitely different, this gravy. There was no Bisto here, alright? It was premium homemade stuff. I'll tell you that for free. I mean, that stare down photo alone is enough. I mean, that's in MMA law forever now, that is. I tried to find one where John McCarthy's fat ass wasn't taking up half the screen. Unfortunately, he's a bit hard to crop out. He's the size of a small boat. But that fight had everything you needed for a different gravy one. It was on a massive card. It was the co-main event of 189, which was main evented by McGregor and Mendes, I believe, the interim title belt at 145. The first half of the fight wasn't actually too good, but I mean, that kind of 10 minutes at the end, that goes down in history, I'm not going to lie. So yeah, there is not a more deserving fight of different gravy than this one. And joining it in different gravy, this one could be slightly controversial, but I'm going to put the recent rematch that went down in July of Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje for the BMF title. I think what makes a blockbuster fight is moments. I mean, in the Lawler against McDonald fight, it was a bit more prolonged, right? But that head kick from Gaethje, I mean, if you'd have said that Gaethje was going to knock out DP, the last move I would have said was a head kick. It was just such a spectacle in the moment. And then when you add in the fact that obviously he lost the first fight and both of those guys are household names, fan favourites that everybody was buzzed to see fight again, it just, in my opinion, it just about sneaks into different gravy. I mean, it could go top of mustard, that was originally where I put it, but then if you think about the hype going in and the insaneness of the knockout itself, I thought Gaethje was going to win, I did, but I thought it would be an uppercut, not a head kick, which is crazy. Almost the same as Leon's against Usman. Insane, different gravy. Unfortunately, after that massive high note, I'm going to have to bring you back down to reality with the rematch of Aljamain Sterling and Piotr Jan, which for me, it was a bit iffy. At UFC 273, everyone was talking about Burns and Hamzat, obviously, but in my opinion, I was more excited about this fight, and the reason was with the way the first one ended and the fact that they both had a reason to really put a stamp on a performance like this, I thought it was going to be fireworks. Jan obviously pissed the fight away with his illegal knee. Well done, mate, you smart cunt. And then you had Aljo, who was like, oh, he's just an actor, all that kind of stuff. I honestly thought that it was either going to be a knockout for Jan or a submission for Aljo, and what we got was neither. I mean, some of the grappling exchanges and a lot of the control from Aljo was interesting to watch. It was intriguing, but it was also slightly boring. I mean, for me as a long-time watcher of it, I enjoyed it a little bit, but I can see why a lot of the broader fan base wouldn't. That's why I'm going to put it in bit iffy. I never really thought about Mustard, and again, I would rather watch Ngannou Lewis than Carla against Rose. I would rather fight Mark Hunt on a day's notice and let him chin me than watch that shit again. So, it's definitely above that, but it's no higher. Next up, we move to a proper women's MMA fight and not a 25-minute yoga session. It's Zhang Wei Li versus Joanna Tu. I'm putting it top of Mustard. Now, if I'm on about their first fight, I'll have to make a completely different bloody level for it. It's better than different gravy. It's like different bloody curry sauce, if you get what I'm saying. But in terms of the rematch, I mean, it had a finish, and the first one didn't. A lovely little spinning back fist from Zhang. And the rest of the fight was exciting, very, very good, and incredibly competitive. I just think those two are always going to put on good fights. It's a little bit like a Whittaker-Romero situation, which I nearly put on this list, but I just decided not to. But no, I don't think there's a world where you put these two in a cage and they don't put on a show. I just think they're both, in terms of women's MMA, and I'm not going to shit on women's MMA too much in this segment, but it's crap used. No, I'm kidding. But it is, but no, this one was definitely up there as one of the better women's MMA fights that I've ever seen. And the first one was the best. This one, not far behind. Not quite different gravy, but definitely top of Mustard. Next up, a controversial one in terms of the decision, but not in terms of the fact it was a barnstormer. Volk Holloway 2. I'm going to put it in Mustard. I'm going to put it probably just in front of Stipe DC. Now, I'm going to start off this entry by pissing some people off. Volk 3-2. We'll leave that one there. But in terms of the fight itself, it was everything that I was expecting it to be on the lead up. It was at 251, which was obviously a massive card. It was the first Fight Island card, and it definitely delivered. My reasoning for putting it where it is like I said, there are moments in these fights that can kind of carry them up a bit, and I think even though there was a finish in Stipe DC2, I thought the overall fight itself was more competitive and a better watch, but the moment and the knockout in the Adesanya against Alex fight for me just edges it. But I do think it's definitely and completely solidly in that Mustard tier. It's a fight I've probably watched 10-15 times. I mean, the amount of times that I've gone back, I've had mates say, oh, I think Max won. And you watch it and you score it every time. It's 3-2 either way. I know there's controversy. I know I made some more by saying Volk won, but it's one of those fights that gets people talking, and that does factor in. I would say in terms of strictly competition and an exciting watch for the entire duration, it's probably the best featherweight title fight of all time. Of course, there's the McGregor-Aldo knockout and the Aldo-Holloway fights. They were great. But in terms of a whole 25 minutes, this takes number one by a mile. Next up, we're going to go back a little bit to the rematch of Woodley and Thompson, which I think I'm going to put in the middle there of bit iffy. Now, again, it's another one of these fights that a lot of the hype was based on the first encounter, which was a crazy fight. Again, like Lawler McDonald, it was the co-main of a Conor card. It was the NYC one, 205. So that in itself also brings a level of hype. And that really, really killed my, and I think a lot of other people's outlooks on the fight itself. I mean, it wasn't an awful fight. Again, I've said this before. I would rather do anything MMA. I would rather spend a night with Cyborg, okay? I'm going to say it, than watch Rose Carla 2, alright? But if the first fight wasn't as amazing as it was and we had this one, it probably wouldn't have been received as badly as it was. But if you have a first fight that's an amazing matchup and then you rematch it pretty much straight after and it's a dud, that's going to hurt it. So I think it was a better watch than Jan Sterling, but I think Jones Gus at least had that entertaining finish, which is why I'd put it above Woodley Thompson 2. This one for me needs no introduction. Usman against Colby 2 is going straight in different gravy. That whole Usman-Colby kind of, I suppose, a duology really is how you'd put it, was just incredible. It's kind of what happens when you get a couple of wrestlers that can't take each other down with any kind of frequency. You just end up slugging, don't you, really? And because they're wrestlers, yes, they learn to strike, but they're not as technical, so it becomes more of a brawl. And that kind of recipe, over both fights, it just ended up with complete fireworks. I mean, on one side, you've got Usman with the power advantage, and you got the granite chin of Covington. I mean, it was made in the start. It was always going to be a great fight. Now, again, I'm going to annoy some people here. I thought that Colby won the second fight, but it was close. You could argue there was a draw in there, but I think he won the second fight, and I had him up 3-1 after 4 in the first fight. I know it's controversial, don't click off, alright? But the fact we had 5 rounds of mayhem, and we still have that debate about who won, that shows it's a good fight, right? Well, usually anyway. Fucking, again, Rose and Carla, fuck off, but... yeah, I just think that in terms of everything as well, the build-up, the kind of the animosity there as well, there's that kind of element to it. It's one of those fights where you can go back and watch it whenever, and every single time you're off your feet and you're fucking shouting in your mum's basement. Well, that's just me, but, you know. Anyway, yeah, let's move on to the last fight. This is definitely in the thumbnail, and I need you to watch up to this point. I need me audience retention. I need to get me fucking watch hours up so I can make money off of this crap. But anyway... it's the rematch of Conor versus Diaz. Now, if this was based on hype alone, again, I'd need to make a new tier list and just call it any fucking Conor fight in history, but it's not. It's based on the fight itself, and it was mustard. It was definitely mustard. It wasn't no ketchup, it was mustard, alright? A really action-packed 25 minutes, obviously. You had the Irishman who started well, the nutty Irishman who's probably on some kind of interesting stuff. Anyway, not important. He started quickly, and Nate came back, which is kind of how you'd expect a fight like that to go, right? I mean... honestly, I think if you gave him 100 rounds, he'd beat every heavyweight at the same time, Nate Diaz. So, that's just how he is. I would say if you look back at the entirety of Conor's career, in terms of any of his fights that have actually gone the distance, this was definitely the best. I know he's not had that many that have gone the distance, but even just in terms of the general spectacle of the fight itself, it's up there as one of his best. Now again, I know I've mentioned it a lot in this video, but these kind of fights, what makes them different gravy over mustard usually is those moments, and all this needed was a knockout from Conor. I mean, imagine if he just left Diaz unconscious and twitching on the canvas like a fucking empty picking blanket or something, I don't know, but he didn't. The fight was still great, so it's definitely mustard, it's no lower, but for me, in terms of the overall thing itself, it's not quite different gravy. And there we have it, beautiful people. That is the completed UFC Rematches tier list. Now, like I said earlier, I'm very uninventive and I'm very fucking lazy, so I'm sorry it's a tier list, but I'm going to be coming up with some more interesting ideas in the near future. Make sure you like and subscribe. And yeah, I'm going to go do me washing now, which again is going to be more exciting than Rose Carla 2.